Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Hayden Wazell. I'm the Secretary of the Board for the Black Screen Office and a media and entertainment producer and software developer with Z-Drive. I live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, commonly referred to as Vancouver. The Banff Media Festival and the Black Screen Office respectfully acknowledge that the treaty territory in which the festival takes place is located on the traditional lands of the Treaty Number 7, which is comprised of the Stoney Nakoda nations of Wesley, Chiniki and Bearspaw, and the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Piikani, Kainai, Siksika Nation, and the Tsuut'ina. Treaty Number 7 is also shared with Métis people of Region 3. This area was also occupied by the Tinaka Nation and the Musqueam peoples. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, or newcomers this generation or generations past. We would like to also acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as the result of the transatlantic slave trade. We honor and pay tribute to our ancestors of African origin and descent. We all strive for a respectful partnership with Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, to healing and we're on the path to healing and reconciliation. We are also indebted to the Indigenous community because this project was inspired by the imaginative on-screen protocols and pathways document that was created to help the non-Indigenous work with Indigenous creators, communities, and stories in creating film, television, and interactive digital media. The Black Screen Office is pleased to be here today with Being Seen Project. This research project consulted over 400 Black, people of color, 2S LGBTQIA+, and people with disabilities across Canada and in both languages to develop directives for creating more authentic and inclusive content. These directives were rolled out through 6 research reports that focused on core themes common to all underrepresented communities and then dug into more detail with specific reports for Black, people of color, 2S LGBTQIA+, and people with disabilities. Shaw Rocket Fund asked us to take a specific look at these issues as they relate to children and children's media within these target demographics. The resulting report that they funded is what we are here to discuss today. Thank you to Shaw Rocket Fund for your support with the Being Seen Project and ongoing support as we seek to build a more equitable industry. I would like to introduce you to Shalene Sangha, VP Content, Kids, and Family at Boat Rocker Studios, who will be the moderator for us today.
Now the trouble is how we get on these chairs.
Test.
So thanks everyone for inviting us. Thanks to Sean, BSO, for inviting us to be on this panel because we all have a lot to say about the subject matter and we can't wait to get into it. So I'm going to start off by introducing everyone on this panel. They're all amazing, starting with Kelly Lynn. Ashton, she's the lead researcher on the report and now is very well versed in all representation in all forms. And she also worked in TV for a long time, worked at all children's television and has worked in content for years too, so comes at it from a place of knowing what we do as well. And then I'd like to introduce Maria Kennedy. Maria is the co-founder and executive producer and owner of Little Engine Moving Productions. They produce, distribute kids content all around the world and interactive content. She's also a YMA board member and she's very passionate about representation, very passionate and an advocate for building a more inclusive industry. And then we go to Kai Little White, who is a writer and producer of immersive experiences for kids. She recently was an associate producer for CBC's Gary's Magic Fort. I almost forgot the name, which was CBC, and she's also working on a CBC initiative to center the voices of disabled writers and creators, content creators. And then last but not least, we have Hadiel Dowling. Hadiel began his career as an Emmy-nominated actor which sparked a passion for him to create content. He's written for Cartoon Network and he's developing a show with Chorus. He's also a very active YMA board member and is building some great initiatives for youth to build an inclusive industry for them and get more content on screen that is inclusive. So we're going to start with Kelly Lynn. Tell us about the report. We want to hear more. How did it happen? How did it all start? How did you go about the research? And what did they all say?
All of it. Yeah. So as Hayden mentioned, this was inspired by the Imaginative on-screen protocols and pathways. I read that, was blown away by what a great document it was, and thought we need to have something like that for other underrepresented groups. Telefilm agreed. And then all these other funders came on board because the world was starting to change, and people realized we need to change and we need some help to figure out how to change. So the funders, Telefilm, Shaw Rocket Fund, as mentioned, Bell Fund, Ontario Create, CBC, Real Canada, Out TV, and Creative BC. I always have to have my notes to make sure I don't forget anybody. And then, Agnes said, can we have one specifically for kids? And that's why we're here today. So we talked to people from those 4 underrepresented groups, and then for the Children's Media Report, we talked to parents from within as part of the overall consultations, and focus groups and interviews with children's content creators from those groups, and then we talked to kids from 6 to 17. This is during the pandemic. We had to do it virtual, so it just didn't work for the younger age groups. We did talk to parents and content creators about preschool content, but we couldn't work with preschoolers directly. It was even challenging for the 6 to 9-year-olds. But we also found that for the 6 to 9-year-olds, they weren't as aware of representation. And when we talked to the parents, it became clear that it's because the parents are often curating the content for the kids, so they're seeing the representative content that the parents want. So it's only as they got older that they started to become more aware of the wider picture of the content that's out there and not being able to see themselves. So we took a very intersectional approach to all of our research so that people could bring all of themselves to it. And I'd say as a kids content creator, you can look at the Children's Media Report, but I would also encourage you to look at the others because they deal with, they're all interconnected. So they look at topics like when can you tell a story from outside your community? Authentic casting, what actually is authentic storytelling. And then we dig into stereotypes, and then for the specific Kids Media Report, looking at their progression to understanding about representation and the impact that it can have on these kids. One of the things that surprised me through the research was how many multiracial families we were talking to, because StatsCan, they have strange definitions for multiracial, and I fully believe that it's underreported, because we had so many. When I say multiracial, I don't mean just like people like myself who are multiracial, but the context of the families, which are different races, and that's something I would really like to communicate to content creators, because those families are not seeing themselves. I mean, a little bit more, with shows like Run the Burbs and Underwoods, and so we're starting to get there, but there is such a demand for that. So I think that's the top level stuff that I wanted to talk about.
And I encourage everyone to read the report. I cried when I read it. It's really, it's true. We're making content for kids, and we need to be mindful of how they're receiving it, and I loved it. So I want to start off, there's a lot of content creators in this room. What does authentic content look like? And are there any examples of how to do it right? And I'm going to start with Maria.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming. It is such
Microphone.
a
Mike,
beautiful room.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to thank all of you for coming, because it's so beautiful to see a room of faces of all different colors and all different colors on the screen. And thank you to the Shaw Rocket Fund and the Black Screen Office and Banff. For me, what is authentic content? Specifically, I'm a preschool and kids producer. So it's stories that are told through the screen that have realistic non-stereotypical representation where children see their faces and their skin colors and their cultures told through stories that are that they recognize, that are not that are not whitewashed, that are told from people from their cultures. And I think everyone on this panel, we try to do that through the stories that we're telling. For me, with preschool content, I'm also producing preschool animation. You don't always see children or characters of color in animation, so for me the goal is to hire people of color, diverse peoples for the voice actors, for the directors, for the writers, in front of and behind the screen.
And I think that it's interesting, that point, because it's something that people don't think about, that there's two things you're doing when you don't give that role to a diverse actor. Is that one, you're taking that job away from somebody who otherwise would have gotten that job if it were live action. And two, you're just not representing authentically. And things like voice and cadence and the way that people talk, it's so important. And there's certain words that people use from different cultures, and having somebody who can do that authentically is meaningful, right?
Exactly. Yes. Well, I'm half Filipino, and so the studio that my office is in, Blue's Clues, shoots there 8 months of the year. And Josh, who's the main host, is Filipino, and so they had his Lola on, and they told the story of his family, and I don't see that very often. I've seen it in Craig of the Creek. I don't see cultures shown with the family, and but we're seeing more of it now.
Kai?
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you also for everybody being here. I think for me, what authentic representation means is telling a story from a lived experience. And to me, what that means is either, think about it this way, if someone says, when I was a kid, this happened to me, or my grandmother said this. If there's that personal connection with a story, then it starts feeling authentic. You start feeling more connected to that story. You care more. You start feeling empathy because you're getting truth. You are witnessing truth. And when we create stories, we want to create a fresh perspective on truth. When it's done well, it's balancing universality, things, emotions that we all go through, but doing it through an authentic, through a unique lens. And so as we create content and more content, we always want it to be fresh and original, and at the same time we want it to be relatable. Mm-hmm. So in doing that from that space of lived experiences, you are witnessing that. And it can happen, I think, in, I'll say, 3 ways. Either you are given space, and one show I can think of is Pablo, or actually another one I'm going to say is, Turning Red. That's one where, Domi Shishu's given the space to create an authentic story from her own experience, her own culture, and was able to equip the teams, the leads in the teams, the actors, the spaces, and again, being very specific, but also being very universal. There's another example where, for example, Pablo, which is a series about an autistic boy, and it was a parent who was not, the creator was not autistic, but she wanted to create understanding of that community. So she reached out in terms of the writers and the voice actor, and the actor who's going to play Pablo was also an autistic boy. The thing came up that with the writers, not everybody was necessarily at the level to go and work in the writer's room, but they trained them because it needed to happen. And it's that extra effort to make sure that you're making that space. Or in some cases, you're taking that space. And I think about First Day, which is out of ABC in Australia, and it's also on CBC, Hulu, and a bunch of other networks, which is amazing. It was the first time in Australian TV that you had a transgender character in a lead role that started off as a short, and the initiative was to increase the number of female producers. They went further than that in terms of even all the producers being female to let's tell a transgender story. Why? Because the creator had a person in their family who was transitioning, and they wanted to, again, personal, firsthand, it's your, well, not firsthand, but it's your family, it's someone who you are experiencing it with, and decided to put that on the screen. And again, in this case, they're retaining the IP. And so not only are they telling the story, they're all the people behind the scenes, they're owning the story. And Viveka said yesterday, when you're controlling your narrative and where it goes, then you've really claimed power. And so to me, that's authentic storytelling.
Great. So let's talk a bit about on-screen representation. What's the importance of it? Is it enough to simply have a diverse cast of characters, or what do you need to do to really make sure that you're doing authentic, great content? And we're going to start with Hadiel.
So for that, I'd say, being an actor, getting my start in this industry through that lens, I got to see a lot of breakdowns. And those included how, diverse perspectives and experiences were often treated as a monolith. Like, there have been so many times auditions would just label you as black and not really take into account people like myself, or black Latino, or how there's Caribbean black people, or black people from Africa. Like, there's many different multicultural elements to blackness, and that applies to many different other aspects of identity as well. And so the next step, I think, in the conversation is having a little bit more nuance in the types of representation we're seeing. And that also includes having more people of color, more diverse people in positions of power, being able to co-show run and run their own shows, as I'm fortunately being permitted to do. And yeah, like, I think that's ultimately the next step, and having, networks meet with us halfway and take us under their wing and mentor us, and have us also be willing to put in the work in order to, have that representation be embraced.
I'm going to go a little off book, but one of the things that I often hear when talking about that kind of content is it's too niche. It's people aren't going to get it. What do you say to that? Would you think that that kind of content would not have a place in be a commercial success, essentially?
Yeah, so it's funny you bring that up. So the show I have with Chorus features a very diverse cast, and I'd actually shared it with a few of my mentors who were white, and one of the things that they had mentioned was that, you shouldn't pitch things which are too diverse because they won't do well overseas. And I found that to be really interesting because I just, used Google once, and turns out 15% of the population of the entire planet is white. So I think it would do pretty well. But yeah, it has to do with, educating people and sharing these sorts of statistics with them. And yeah, no, I think ultimately if your characters are compelling in their own right, and that their ethnicity absolutely complements the story, but it's not just the thing which is propelling the storyline, then I think people of all colors, of all backgrounds, are going to be able to relate to it, and it's going to resonate with people.
Yeah, I totally agree. First Day, I love First Day, but it is one of those things where it is about the trans experience of coming out, right? What we want to get to is a place where we're telling stories that come from an authentic place that maybe is from a myth of a different culture, but is still super aspirational. Anybody in kids media knows what that is. We all talk about aspirational content. We need that. We need to have something that resonates and still can be that hit show. And the more we get the shot to make that kind of content, the more we can prove it. We just need those shots, right? Kai, do you have about on-screen representation?
Thank you so much. To add to that, and even where you went a little bit off book about the idea of relatability and universal truths, and bringing that forward, the actors do only so much. They don't write their scripts, their lines, choose the context, the location. They don't even dress themselves. So, they are literally in some ways just puppets. So it has to actually go, it's the easiest thing to do, go put, a diverse person there with someone's in a wheelchair. That's it. We don't need to do anything else. We don't need to code them with anything. That's just enough visually. But it's everything that goes into that. How are they dressed? How do they move? How do they speak? What does their hair and makeup look like? In animation, black person's hair in animation is quite a joke. It is a thing. I've heard about this in studios where people have gone on tirades about how can we actually just draw the black woman's hairline so it looks realistic. But in live action, it becomes an even bigger thing. And I use an exact example of shooting a proof of concept recently with two very established young female actresses. They're in their teens. And one of the actresses, again, she's been in a bunch of shows. She's been in this industry for a while, almost in tears, said that this was the first time on this production that she actually had a black makeup artist, hair and makeup artist. It was the first time where they were like, oh yeah, we got your color. It's good, no problem putting it on. She said it was the first time where they actually knew what to do with her hair, and it wasn't a thing. Again, literally almost in tears. And I said, well, normally happens. She's like, you're like, I don't know anything to do with your hair. We'll just figure it out. And you think about that, and again, going back to the actors, of what that's like for a performer, especially a young performer, to go on set, you're asked to go in front of the camera, be all aspiration and inviting, and yet you are made to feel like the team around you don't even understand who you are and aren't making you comfortable.
And it's been an issue across the board. I've had that issue on shows that we've done, and really we've had to actually say to the DGC, like to the IATSE, whoever, I can't remember. I'm sorry, IATSE, thank you, and be like, we need to bring people in who are outside because we can't find them. So then that means we have to actually have those fights, right? And you know who was the first person to do that and be successful? Anthony Q. Farrell, who should be all of our, like, he's the golden star in terms of great representation. He's amazing. Hadiel, you want to share your story about hair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, so I'm gonna like try to be very ambiguous with this, so you guys can't guess which production it is. But yeah, no. So like for one of my first few roles, I essentially was a big production. I was able to be on set a lot, and that required, of course, daily daily lineups, as they call it, when you line up the hair and look spiffy every single day. And so, yeah, my hair and makeup people weren't black, and so they pushed back my hairline, every so slightly. And, for my monthly haircut, I always drove all the way to this, like, very Caribbean located place in my town. And I have a barber there who never really speaks to me. He's this very old Jamaican man, very stoic and calm. I would usually just greet him, tell him what I wanted. He'd give me a nod, do the haircut, and we'd be off. And this one time, he's like, "What'd they do to your hair, man?" And he just was completely blown away. And I explained, "Well, I'm acting on this show, and this is what," and I was also, by the way, like, very young at the time, so I just thought this is the way they would cut my hair and didn't want to rock the boat or anything. And no, he's like, "No, this is wrong. If they keep doing this, you're going to be bald by the time that you're 20. So yeah, that kind of woke me up to it, and I shared my concerns with the production. And they ended up changing things and making sure that I was comfortable moving forward. And that's just to say that, you could have even diverse writers on a production. You could have an actor like myself who's diverse. But if every aspect of that does not have either people who are diverse or people who understand how to manage diverse hair or culture or whatnot, then you're not going to get that authentic representation. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maria, do you?
I just quickly wanted to add to that my own personal experience growing up in small town Newfoundland, and there was one black man who lived in the town. He was the town doctor. He was the most educated man in Marystown. There were a couple of Filipino families and then a Chinese family, and so. As a kid in the 70s, I did not see myself on TV. However, I did see myself on Sesame Street, on the Polka Dot Door, and those were the shows that I was drawn to. I was drawn to kids shows, where I saw other brown-skinned people, and I think that certainly inspired me. That's all you need. You need just one spark of a show where you or your child sees yourself represented. To make you want to do better and be a good global citizen and represent everybody. And I just wanted to talk statistics. In Canada, there are, I think we're close to 9 million people of color living in Canada. So it's like 25%. Yeah. It's 1 in 4 people. And you can perhaps see that in the room as well. So it's representation matters. And it's good business. It's good business.
Well, and also, to that point, if we're open to watching content about white people, why can't it go the other way, too? Like, Never Have I Ever. There's a lot of shows that have resonated, right? We need to look at those and make it happen for kids, too.
And we should also talk about, because it's probably not talked about enough, the niche markets, the LGBTQ community, and there's a little show called The Faye and Fluffy Show that the Shaw Rocket Fund funded, and it is the most progressive preschool series I've ever seen in my life. And I was saying at MIP TV to Agnes that I don't think any other country would have funded this show. And kudos to you for doing it, because there are little children who want to be Faye and Fluffy when they're adults, and and who are excited about wearing makeup and being fabulous, and now they see the opportunity to be that on the screen.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the importance of this, like Maria just did, how does inauthentic content impact young viewers? And I'll start with Kai.
Okay, I'm going to build on what
Yeah.
Maria said in terms of not seeing yourself on the screen. And I know for myself, growing up between Jamaica and Canada and being in the intersection of many intersectionalities, I never saw myself. I know for my son who's 6, my stepdaughter who's 13, they often complain that they don't see themselves in their families. And then you go further. It's the opposite of being seen. You literally feel invisible, like I don't exist. You start questioning if your reality is valid. It becomes something you have to keep explaining that people don't understand, and you feel the burden, as you said, kind of even with First Aid, like you have to explain to everybody, this is what transgender is. Why can't you just be? Why can't you just be seen? Why do you need to have to explain yourself every time you have a conversation? If you're pitching something, you have to explain this big cultural thing, but at the same time, there's this assumption that we all know about fairies and mermaids, and it's just the thing, but you want to tell them about a succulent, and nobody knows, right? But for the kids, besides feeling like they don't exist, they don't matter, their lives aren't valid, it starts going further, because if they're conscious of it, which came out in the report, that sometimes you have parents who are very conscious. I know when my stepdaughter participated, they were like, she was, I think, 12 at the time, they're like, oh, you're like university level, because she has me, her mom, and so some of them are conscious of it, and they're offended. They're like, I don't want to watch this, or they complain, they notice it. On the flip side, you have the kids who don't notice it. And they internalize that, and they think, this is normal. This is how I'm supposed to act. This is how I'm cool. If I have glasses, it goes beyond that. Like, if I have glasses, I must be smart, or I can't be athletic. If I'm black, I must be, really good at sports and music. You start to think this is who you are. And so, as Maria said, if you don't see a possibility of what you could be, that it's okay, it's accepted, it's understood, then you'll never even aspire to that. And that's career-wise, gender identity, anything at all. If you don't see it, you can't be it, or it's something for someone else, but not someone like you.
It's honestly, the internalizing of that stereotype is the most damaging thing. Like, I feel like I've been affected by that my whole life, and I feel like I always had to act white enough so that I could fit in, so that I could move up in my career, so that I could do this, that, and the other. And I made a pretty good career of doing that. But I would love to, pivot now and be more Indian, That would be great. Hadiel, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, in regards to authenticity, I think as creators of media, we really have this tool which I think moves individuals in a way no other form of technology, I suppose, can really do. To point to an example of that, like the KKK started, getting real here, started on the idea of essentially, black people are inferior to whites. And that central idea, sort of like a story, worked for a little while, and it actually died out because they still had to live around black people and couldn't find reasons to justify that hatred. And so it was actually because of the D.W. Griffith's film, The Birth of a Nation, where he used media, used the film and its images to, villainize black individuals, that was able to then actually revitalize the KKK and hatred. And so similarly, as creators in media, we can use media as a tool, which can be used to educate and illuminate audiences, or it can also be used to weaponize and radicalize individuals as well. And so, we have a huge responsibility in that regard, but it's also very hopeful because it shows that if you create the right kind of content with the right people, we could have a very optimistic future where everyone is included. So,
and we need it in a time like right now. So through this report, as I said, I cried. These kids had a lot to say, and I saw the real impact of this, what we're talking about right now in authentic content. Kelly Lynn, can you take us through a little bit of what they said?
I picked just a few quotes to be able to tease you into reading the full report. One of a 13-year-old said, I see black people being funny, goofy types. They're portrayed as clowns, and that kind of hurts me. A 14-year-old said, I rarely ever see somebody with a disability. It's frustrating. I really wish that they included more of that So it would make me feel better, and for other people too. When I do see it, I feel really happy and comforted, like it feels more normal. And an 11-year-old said, when a child sees someone who looks like them, but who maybe doesn't act the same as them, they will try to become like the character and follow that stereotype. So this is pretty sophisticated thinking coming from, middle school and slightly older kids, and part of that is just to say they're aware.
Yeah. They're aware and they're internalizing it, so we need to do better for them. So knowing this impact, let's talk a little bit about writing. Can writers write outside of their community, i.e. can a white writer write for a BIPOC story? Can a straight writer write for a 2S LGBTQIA+, or cis writer for that matter? What do you think? And we're going to start with Hadiel.
So in that regard, like first breaking down the question, I think a white writer, for instance, writing for a BIPOC perspective is very different, I think, than a BIPOC writer writing for another BIPOC perspective, even if they're not from the same ethnic group. Obviously, for instance, to point an example, Black people and Indigenous people are very, very different, but we do share relatability in understanding how systemic issues have affected both of us. And so with that, I would say, if you have a character, which isn't maybe perhaps the main character of a story, but a character like a secondary character, which is from a different group, I would feel comfortable writing for that group if I consulted with that ethnic background as well, and thought I could tell that authentically. But generally speaking, if the lead character of a project is part of a certain group, it would always be better to make the effort to either have that member of that group be a co-creator and really have a position of power so they can nurture the creation of that representation. And so it's not this thing where you have one member of the production, pushing that story forward, and you're just consulting with that member of that diverse group on the side. And then more just in regards to other aspects of identity like disability, that's an area I want to see represented further. A little example of what I've sort of done to champion voices in that regard is I wrote an episode of Dino Dana, which featured a wheelchair-bound character, and also based on my experiences with a very good friend who is wheelchair-bound. And we ended up, getting that episode through the gate. We hired a disabled actor who had never been on screen. In fact, the only role he had done prior was he voiced a disabled character. So now he was quite literally being seen on camera, which was fantastic. And we eventually had a kid who watched the show who was disabled, so enthusiastic about this representation that he wrote into the network to just share that he was finally happy that he was being seen. And it's a very heartwarming story, but at the end of the day, I'm not disabled, so we got it like 2/3 of the way there. So long story short, essentially, I think that at the end of the day, it is important that we have authentic representation, that we have people from a particular group writing for that group. But if we're unable to actually secure that creative, that should never preclude us to even trying. Because the visual of having that representation is also incredibly important.
And I think that's so important to say because we don't want to be perceived as, okay, so you have a diverse cast, like for example, the next step this season had a 20-person cast, very diverse. We can't hire an actor to represent a writer to represent every single different group we have. So what we did was we did our best to have a very diverse and an inclusive room from every group from most groups that we were representing, and where we couldn't, we had to hire consultants. We tried our best to hire, we were actually looking for writers with disabilities, and we couldn't find one in time. And I'm disappointed by that because I want to be like the model and I want to be like the best at it, but sometimes we have to roll with the punches and find ways to make sure we're still representing authentically. And I think that's what scares people off. Well, how am I supposed to do this? You have to just try your very best, and nobody's gonna judge you very harshly if you can't, I hope. Don't judge me harshly. Maria?
I wanted to just add to that. So I'm currently producing a preschool series for a Canadian broadcaster in which the broadcaster partnered me with a white male creator, and he's incredibly talented, very musical person. However, I wanted to bring as much representation and diversity into the writer's room onto the team as possible. And so I partnered with Real Life Pictures, which is Kulbinder Saran Caldwell. She's a literary agent who represents diverse groups across Canada, across the world. And also I reached out to the Black Screen Office, to Joan at the Black Screen Office. My team contacted the Indigenous Screen Office. So you have to work a little harder to get a 50% represented writers room. And the hardest thing for me, and I'm still finding it a challenge, is to find a diverse composer, female composer. And we're still looking. If anyone in the room knows, oh, I see a hand there. I'll talk with you later. Yes, but it's our responsibility to work harder and to find the teams that will represent.
And I think one of the big things is it's about going outside of your circles, and that's what people tend not to do. It's like, oh, I know this person, and that's how people get excluded, right? So it's like doing outreach, doing your research, right? It's an additional labor, but it's additional labor that's worth it in the end.
And I would include the broadcasters in that group as well, because they're often used to working with the same teams who deliver, who they trust, and who are able to get perhaps international financing, to build out bigger budgets. But I ask if there are any broadcasters in the room to consider diverse producers and diverse production teams.
So how do we do this? Kelly Lynn's going to tell us with the directives that were created through this study.
Well, I think the last two comments are really it. Yeah. It's about doing the work. And the directives, they were referred to yesterday as idiot-proof, and I love that, because the intention is for them to be simple and clear. Really want you to read the reports, but at a minimum, I know you're all very busy people, download the directives, which are not telling you what to do and not do, but asking you to think. So are you the right person to tell the story? What work do you need to do to make sure that it's authentic? Think about the characters you're writing, and are you inadvertently fostering and supporting stereotypes? Are you subverting stereotypes, which would be even better? So that's what's in the directives. We have our last report on people with disabilities coming out June 22nd, and then we're just gonna keep doing panels, and we're developing workshops with the Shaw Rocket Fund. We're gonna do one specifically for children's creators to help you to learn how to implement these directives. Because the first sort of level is, I get it. I know what these concepts are. But then how do I actually do it? And that's what we're going to be doing with the workshops. And we're just going to keep repeating the messages, and because it takes time.
Hopefully we'll get there. So I'm going to end with a question that I stole from Jennifer Holness. What is the importance of being seen? And we'll start with Maria.
I mean, for children watching TV, it's everything, because the TV screen has so much power for a young child. They're so easily influenced by everything they see in the stories that are told to them. It's what can inspire them to be the best version of themselves as adults, and that's what we're all aspiring to be. Everyone in this room here, we want to be good global citizens, and we want our children to be as well. And that's why representation and being seen is everything, really. Yeah, it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
We have 5 minutes, so we got to keep it tight. So Kai?
Okay, I'll say this quickly. Why is it important? As I said before, like, I exist at the intersection of many intersectionalities. My family does, and for both myself and my family, we've never really seen ourselves. I know I've never seen any show, anything that has me exist. As far as media is concerned, I don't exist, and my family doesn't exist, and most of the people I know don't exist. So personally, for me, it is to kind of say to the world, I do exist, my family does exist. I draw from real person's stories that I don't see. And I feel like through showing these things, not just, oh, you're going to only see one lens that's mainstream and whatnot, but showing these other things allows for understanding, allows for empathy, allows for acceptance, allows for ease of engagement. So when you're working together, you're collaborating, you're looking for people, you feel more familiar, and it's you want, as you said, being a global citizen, it's collaboration, it's connecting with people, and unless you see it, it doesn't exist. So authentic representation is about everyone being seen, being visible.
Hadiel?
Yeah. So I would say for me, like I'm a philosophy and film major, so I approach things from a philosophical angle, and I'll leave you guys with a Latin quote, which goes, vita brevi ars longa, which means life is brief and art is long-lasting. What that really is meant to say is that, like, media, art is our legacy. It's what we leave behind. And if what we leave behind isn't authentic to us and didn't really truly represent us and allow us to be seen, it's almost as though we were never really here. And so I think, to me, that's the importance of being seen, ensuring that you have an authentic legacy that people can look upon and see you for as you were, not as for how you were interpreted by other people who did not get that genuine connection, understanding of who you were as a human being. So, yeah.
I'm going to say that when I was a kid, I was not quite brown enough for the brown kids, and I was not quite white enough for the white people. So I felt like there was no space for me, which makes you feel like you have to act a certain way and be a certain way in order to be accepted. And it's something that I didn't even realize until way, way, way later, like probably 4 years ago, like literally. And it's something that you then wake up to, and you realize that your personality is crafted based on this model of trying to make other people accept you and not see you as other, not tell you their favorite curry recipe. Yes, somebody's done that. Or tell you that, oh, what's that thing in your hair? Is it a weird Indian thing? I don't know where I would get that from. What is that? Like, you know, people often would say these things to you, and it excludes you, right? So the more you're representing people in media, you're showing who they are, and you're allowing other people to accept them. So not only are we combating, you know, inauthentic content, we're combating racism from the ground level, from media, and that's something that's so important. So with that, thank you, everyone. It was so great. Oh, you have a question? Do we have time for a question? I don't know. We have questions. 2 minutes. Okay. You started, so go ahead.
I just wanted to say quickly thank you for acknowledging where this was inspired. I just wanted to say thank you, Hojka, for acknowledging where this came from, the indigenous community. And I just want to say to broadcasters, to production companies, please invite the indigenous communities and families. That's our culture. We feel like we need to be invited. And my daughter is an actor, I'm a producer, and I've recruited Native people. We need to be reached out to. And we need to have a safe person for us when we're on set, when we're a thing. So hire that indigenous producer, to reach out to them in casting so that they feel invited and they feel safe. And also, if you can help support the communities, because as indigenous people, our communities get the worst education. No arts, no support. Yeah, no clean water, And I come from privilege, I've worked hard, so I can bring my daughter to things. I can, she's in acting, and I can drive her to auditions, and I've gone through that, but there are a lot of indigenous families out there who have talented kids, incredible kids, and we need support right from the bottom up to be on that screen. And an elder once told me, our childhood may only be 5% of our lives, but it shapes the 95% of the rest of our lives. And so we're part of that. We're part of shaping that. So thank you for this initiative, and I'm excited about moving forward.
Honestly, what you guys said speaks to me so much, beyond I can't thank you guys enough. Like basically, growing up, I had disabilities, and now actually, like when I'm not doing all the social media stuff, I'm actually in there with the kids every single day. I have kids because I actually grew up in Banff. So I have kids from around the world constantly, some that don't even speak English. And we try and fill the room with diverse things, books, everything you can think of. And like, it's so cool making the connections, showing them what they have similarities to each other, and like watching them grow. And to even have that, like I'm always looking for content like that. And the fact that you guys produce it, like I just gotta give you a round of applause right there. Like seriously. And like, even my boyfriend's family, their family won't actually let any of the kids or anyone in their family watch TV because there's no one representing them. And yeah, just to have this and like that it's growing and getting better like with time by like putting more out there, like I can't thank you enough, like just watching the kids grow from you guys. So thank you.
Thanks. Last question. We're already late.
This is not so much a question, but just two comments. This panel was really fantastic. It really expressed so much of what's wrong and so much of what we can do to make it right. So thank you, guys. Second, I actually wanted to just do a shout out to Tanya, because I don't know if you guys all know this, but she was on Polka Dot Door years and years and years ago, and she was representation for all those African, Canadian, Caribbean, Black people. She was literally it. And that had such a great impact on our community. And I just wanted to say, yeah, we should, just applaud that and her.
Thanks, everyone.